Okay, so let's see the practical application we are going to develop now.
So if I run this now, if I put admin, I know admin, I have programmed it now. So if I put admin, right? Awesome guys, awesome. So it's going to the admin page, so close. If I put a normal user, say ABC, right? And if I say the normal user, if I give a wrong password, wonderful, invalid username password. If I put the right password for a normal user, awesome guys, normal
Okay, so let's continue to develop this application now.
user object. But before I return the user object, I'll have to fill it with the data which is inside this. So now the question is, how can I access the data? Right? Hope what I'm telling is clear to you, right? Because you need to access the data, right? You need to access the data from this object user data table. So how do you access the data, right? Now for that you have to understand what this is, right? And you have to get the data and put it to the obj user before you return it. Now this is defined in the MSDN. So this obj user data table is going to be a child of the user the data table in the ADO.NET, right, data set. So if you look at this, let me open a reference. Give me a sec. So I'm going to open one of the references, right? Okay, so I open some MSDN references, right? So the official guide. So in the MSDN, so the idea of this channel is to make you ready for the industry, right? So this is what industry level developers does. So when they want to refer something, they refer the APIs, right? So the API and they get the technical stuff. For example, this talks about data sets and data tables. So what you are getting now here is actually a data table, right? So it's auto generated code, but this will be a child of data tables, right? So data table. So then this is a official document talking about this. Then if you look at the data table, right, you will see that you can deal with the data table, right? So and you will see that in this data table, now a table is a collection of rows, but of course in this example I'm getting only one row because it's just one it's the username and password will match only for one row. But keep in mind, even if it's another query and if it returns a large number of data, that means it will be multiple rows in a different scenario, like let's say reading all the employee data. So this will be like get all employees, then this data table will have multiple rows. So in this case I have only one row, right? So anyhow, if you look at this in the data table, there's a field to get the rows. So there's a property called rows. So what I have to do now is access this property rows. So what I'm going to do here is on the data table I'm going to access the rows, right? The property rows. So what does the property rows returns? So if you look at this, if I look at the property rows, it returns, if you look here, if you look at the property rows, if you click on it, the property rows returns something called data rows collection. Now if you look at some examples, you will see that it shows how to iterate once you get all the rows. If it's multiple rows, you can iterate, right? But in my case, I don't get multiple rows, so I don't have to iterate. I get only one row, right? So what I can do is from this set of rows, right? I can get because I know I'm getting only one row. I can access it putting square brackets, and I can give the index. Now this is something very important for you to understand. So on the table, I can call for the rows, and I can give me a sec. I can call for the rows, right? And rows and right on this I can put square brackets, let us say like this. See, then I can give the index. Now in my case I get only one row, so the index of the first row is 0 because in C sharp index is 0 base. So if I say 0 here, I'm getting that whatever the first row in this table, right? So I'm going to put that. And what does it returns? Look at this carefully. The return type is data row. Look at this line. See, look at my mouse. So it returns a data row. What is data row? Just I'll show it to you. It returns a data row. A data row is also let me show it to you. Like a data row data tables, it's defined. I will show it to you. So you got data sets, data table row, right? Rows, then see data row. It returns a data row, right? So in the data, it's a class, right? So from the data row, I can access the data. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to store this data inside a data row because it's returning a data row, right? So I'm going to say data row and I'm going to give some meaningful name such as selected something meaningful user or something like that. So this way I am getting the data into a data row. So I have to now when it comes to data rows, I have to be careful to see what namespace I have to include. So let me see it. So the best thing for me to do is just type it, then it will auto include, because if I start typing like this once again data row, and if I select it from this, the namespace is system.data because at the moment it's not included. That's why see so if I select from here, it will get included, right? So if it auto, you see it got included at the top. So now I got a data row. So then from the data row, guys, if you look at the MSD examples, you can access whatever the fields, the columns of that. So in my case, what are the columns, right? So in my case, the columns are, if you look here, the columns are UID, username, password, and user level. Okay, guys. So what I can do now is on this data row, I can say, okay, I can say I need to access, let us say the UID, right? So over here I can say, okay, on the selected user. So how to access? Look at the MSDN, right? So if you look at MSDN, you just put square brackets and within double quotes you give the column name, right? So you put square brackets, then if you give the column name, right, selected, say UID, the whatever the database column name, right? So UID username, then it's giving you that, right? So it gives it, but it gives it as a string, right? So it returns it as a string. So what you have to do is you have to convert also. You get error. Let's see what this error called news. So let me write this statement, then you will understand. So on this, one more important thing, I have to call toString to convert it into a normal string. So that's very important to keep. Then it returns a string, right? So now what do I want here, right? So if you look here, now though I convert it into a string, I need a, so I'm connected, but the UID is an integer, right? If you look at my user class, because I'm going to get this data and put to the user class, right? If you look at the user class, UID is an integer. So I will have to convert this, right? From the DAO, I'll have to convert this into a integer, right? So because of that, I'm going to write convert dot toInt, right? And then convert this into a integer, and then only I can store it in my user object, right? Yeah, my user object dot UID. Okay, my friends, right? So this is how you get the data from this data table, right? Then what do you want next? You want the username, but remember, you don't have to get the username like this because you have already got it and you have done the validation and you have received one item meaning this username and password is correct. So you really don't have to get it this way. You can just say this username is equal to this. If not, I will write both. So if you want, you can say obj username is equal to, right? If you want, you can say is just this username because it's exactly that. If not, as you do for the others, you can just say select user, then what the column name, you have to put the column username, right? So be careful, its username is capital U and capital N. Be careful, just in case, to avoid any problems, just put it same as it is because this is the column name, right? This is not the if you look at the user class, right, this is the field and these are properties and getters and setters of username. But what I'm referring here is not any of them. I'm referring here to the column of the database table. So you have to use the name of the database table column, username, right? Hope that's clear to you, my friends, right? That's very important, right? So yeah, so once again I'm making it clear, this you are referring, make sure it's not to any of these, what you are referring here is the database column, right? I made it very clear to you, right? So because this is the data table from the database, so you have to give the names of the column. So username, it's a string, so you don't have to convert and you need it as a string, so you don't have to convert it into a integer, my friends, right? So I'm going to remove this. Awesome, my friends. Then same, you got the password, right? The password. Once again, the field, if you look at it, it's password. Once again, it's a string, so you don't need to convert it into a integer. Great, great. We are doing really good, friends. Just little more to finish. Just little more to finish, right? So then finally, the user level. You remember there's something called user level. Once again, it's an integer, and once again the field is user level, so I have to make sure that I convert it to integer. All good, my friends, all good. So now we got the object and we return it, right? So that's the end of this method in the DAO. So the DAO has done its task. The DAO has connected to the adapter and run this method, which is this we created in the adapter, this one, get user by username password. So the DAO, guys, has called that method and got the return value. You remember where it is coming from. Just very quickly, once again, it's coming from, if you look at the method, get user, where is it, over here, get user by username. So it's returning a data table, right? So that's why your DAO immediately puts it into a, call it, data table. And then I showed you how to access that data table and see if data is there. If it's 0, that means no data, so you return null. So whoever calls this method, if it returns null, that means the logic class will know that if this returns null, whatever the class will know that it's an invalid username and path. Otherwise, you create an object and put the data and return the object. So whoever calls this method, if it gets the object, it knows that this is valid username, and so the DAO task is completed. So now we have to go one by one backwards. So the DAO will be called by the logic. So I have to look at the logic class. So then when I call the logic class is calling the DAO. So the logic class will receive a user object, isn't it? Because the DAO is returning a user object. So now the logic class should accept that as the return value. So it has to put it into a obj user, and the logic class is also in the same uh, project, so it can easily access the user class, right? So now you got, and then you just put a if condition. That's what I said, right? If this user object is null, that's what I said. So if the DAO returns null, that means you know this is invalid username and password. So what do you want to do? This is a logic, right? So the logic can this is just to validate, right? So let me see. Either I have two options: either to return a boolean instead of this void, either to return the boolean or to return the user object. Now that depends on what I want to do. If I returns a boolean, then who is calling this logic class? The controller, right? If I return a boolean here, then the controller can get only a boolean, and then the controller can inform the login button to say that it's if it's false, then it's unsuccessful login. If it's true, successful. But in addition to that, if let us say if you also want uh, let us say if you also want the user level, let us say if you want to know the user level, you remember, right? Because in addition to this user level, so if the controller wants to know the user level for some task, let us say now to decide whether it's admin, if it's admin, to go to the admin page. If it's a not non-admin, if user level is 1, if it's admin, then go for admin page. So if you want that user level information, then it's important for you to understand that you should not just return a boolean. So for example, what I'm telling is, if you return false here in the logic class, return false, and if not, if you return else, return true, what happens is it will work, but you will lose that user level information, because the logic, then what the controller class gets is a boolean, right? So the controller class calls the user login, so then the controller class will have to store in a boolean, say bln, say login validation, something like this, validation status, right? Something like this. I'm just giving example, but then it will not have the user level information. The other way is, if you want that information also to pass, the logic, instead of passing true or false, the logic can also return a user object, right? It depends on what you want to return. Is it a user object, or if it's not the user object, what do you want, right? Now, so So for example, if it's user object, okay, let us say you are passing the user. In that case, here you will return null. And one more thing, then in the interface, you have to change it. I use yeah, it's going to be a user object, right? So in the implementation, sorry, in the user logic, you return null. If not, you return this object, right? You return straight away the object. So it's up to you depending on your logic, right? Depending on your logic, right? So there's an error. Let's see what this is.